Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to do a quick video about my thoughts on the Dark Tower series so far. So if you don't know, I've been reading the Dark Tower since January, and yeah, so far I finished 4 books and I am not almost a third into the fifth book. And yeah, I quickly wanted to talk in a spoiler-free manner about my thoughts so far. I'm actually quite happy that I started this series. I had no immediate plans to read it before this year, but my friend Scott over on the Bald Booktuber started this read along for it, which he's hosting on Mike's Discord server. And I was like, okay, if there's a read along, I might as well join. And as always, I've held back a bit. But it's been super fun, and I've been very surprised at how much I'm enjoying this. Um, yeah, there are a few aspects that I feel like people never talk about. Like what I had heard about the Dark Tower before I started was like it's super weird. All each book has a different genre basically. Like it's very unique and it's hard to say what it's exactly about. Like it's a fantasy, but also it has sci-fi elements, horror elements, obviously. So I was like confused about how I would feel. So it wasn't the first. It was the thing by Stephen King I was most excited in or most interested in. But I wasn't sure if I should start there because obviously it also interconnects with a lot of his other books. So yeah, my plan was to start with different seasons. But since the read along came along, I was like, okay, I might as well start with Dark Tower, and I'm very happy that I did because I I can't believe how much I like it. Like everything that I just said, that people told me going into it, that it's super weird, etc., etc., all of that is true. But for some reason, it works so well. It's super unique. There are so many things in it where you would be like, how does he make this work? But so far, all of those elements have worked for me. Um, yeah, so I want to quickly go into like a few aspects. So basically, let's start with the plot. So the story deals with basically the gunslinger Roland and his quest to find this dark tower, as the name suggests. And that's kind of the whole premise of it. And a lot of the surrounding details of the story aren't actually explained at the start of the story. Like we know that he's on this journey, we know he's been on this journey for a while when we pick up the story, but we don't really know why he's on this journey and why this is such a major goal of his. But these things get revealed slowly over time in the books. So in terms of plot, it can feel a bit unfocused and a bit, I don't want to say aimless because we clearly have this aim, like Roland is following a very clear target, but it can feel like, why are we doing this, right? Like, why are we on this journey? And sometimes it also feels like Roland himself doesn't really know why we're on this journey. There are some hints as to why he is on this journey, but yeah, it isn't super clear from the start. So I think that's one thing that a lot of people might get hung up on because it's like, well, I'm reading the story and I'm reading, yeah, basically several books to kind of figure out what's happening and why we are on this journey. But personally, for me, that wasn't an issue. Like, because of the other aspects that I'll go into later, even though the plot wasn't super clear about what we were doing and why we were doing it, I was still very into the story. Like, and how I've been describing it is basically ever since book one ended, I was like, okay, I'm in whatever King wants to do with this. I'm in for it because I feel like even though I'm in book five and I'm still unsure how exactly um, all of these things will play out. But I think the way King does it and the way King just tells the story is super intriguing and is so well done that I'm like, I don't even care that the plot can feel a bit unfocused, let's say. Yeah, so that brings me to the other aspects that I really enjoyed. So the plot is one thing that I feel like it's good and each book has a good plot, but the overarching plot is something that I feel like you'll just need to let King do his thing and be like, I'm in for the ride, do whatever you want basically. Because I think in a lot of ways, like if you read the books, like trying to figure out what's going to happen, you're going to be like, well, it feels kind of aimless. And I feel like it would be sad if you don't enjoy the story because of that hang up, because I don't think that's actually that big of an issue, personally for me, obviously. Um, yeah, so let's talk a bit about the characters. So basically, this book or this series, at the start, it's very focused on Roland. And along the way in this journey, we get introduced to more characters, we get more insight into his past as well. And I think the characters are realized incredibly well. Like, I don't think these are the deepest characters I've read. And it's interesting because I think King basically, his characters aren't shallow, but I also wouldn't say they're the most complex. But he manages to get you invested, like they're complex enough to get you invested into them and that they feel like real people. What's impressive is that you get invested in all of their personal issues quite quickly. I think it's it's quite exciting, like how quickly King introduces a character, and then how quickly you as a reader know what kind of person this character is, and how quickly you can really sympathize with that character. So that's something that I was really impressed by, and I think that keeps happening. Like every time he introduces a new character that is going to play a bigger role in the story, it feels like you get invested in them quite quickly. And even though I don't think that they're the most complex character, I think that the way they're realized, they feel very, very realistic, even though they're in situations that aren't realistic. Um, the way that King writes them is incredible. Yeah, like I would say at this point, I don't want to spoil like who the main characters in the series are, but Roland basically assembles this quartet, which is this his basically his fellowship, and I like all characters in that quartet. So yeah, so much for that. I think characters, yes, the main cast is very well realized, but I also think the side cast in each book is realized quite well as well. And I think that has a lot to do with the way King writes. Like this series doesn't have a very l- limited third person point of view style like a lot of other series do. He actually, it feels kind of omniscient, although I think it isn't exactly omniscient, but he will hop POVs quite a lot. Like we will be in Roland's head sometimes, and we'll switch to another person's point of view, and sometimes even the narrator takes over, and it feels like it's kind of omniscient, but we don't always get everybody's thoughts or anything. Like most scenes are from one character's point of view, but then sometimes he'll just sprinkle in another character's point of view as well. Like he'll be saying, okay, while this character was thinking this, this other character was feeling this. So it's like a bit more open than the strict limited style that a lot of modern books are using. And I think that way he can actually keep the reader on their toes a bit, and it keeps you interested and invested, and it's kind of like it allows him to switch point of views a lot. Like basically we get almost each character's point of view in the story. Like at some point we're in everybody's head, it feels like. And it never feels like, hey, why am I seeing the story from this person's perspective, get me back to Roland, or anything like that. I think all of them are well realized, and I think that's why all of these characters feel realistic, and it feels like, okay, we actually know them as people, and what their personal like inner monologues are, what their own idiosyncrasies are, etc. So yeah, I think that's um, realized very well, and that brings me to my next point, which is the writing. And that's actually my biggest point, because I think that part of, I've at least have never heard anybody praise King's writing. I think the only person I've ever heard praise it is Mike. When he did his review for different seasons, he actually talked about how well written the book was. And I think that's the only time I've ever heard anybody say that Stephen King is a very good prose writer. And personally, I'm not somebody who talks a lot about prose, because I don't think I actually know enough about literature to say like, hey, this is great prose or anything. For me, it's usually like if the story is clear, I'm good. And if something prose wise stands out to me, I think then I want to talk about it. But for me, like from the start of the Gunslinger, the, King's prose actually stood out to me. Like it's written so well, and the tone of his prose fits the books and fits the setting really, really well. Yeah, I was really impressed the way that he's writing this, the way he basically realizes each POV, the way he realizes each setting. I also, so this is something that we've been talking about on Discord with Kyle from Red by Kyle. He doesn't like basically the mid-world lingo, the way people talk in this universe. But personally, I really enjoy it, and I also like the small differences between our world, mid-world, and all the different places we see. The way their um, lingo and the way their the particularities about their language changes. Like it feels very authentic to each place, and yeah, I think it's very well realized. And also the writing in general, the writing and especially the atmosphere is incredible. I think that's why personally I liked book one so much, is that it's super atmospheric. Like it's a western setting basically in book one, and I personally wasn't super intrigued by a Western setting. I'm not a huge Western fan myself, but the way King realized it, I don't know what it is, and I can't put my finger on exactly what he does to make this work. But I was just immersed incredibly well into the world, and I feel like wherever he goes, whichever place we are in, whether we're in this open desert or whether we're just walking in a place where there's nothing basically, or whether we're in a small town, each setting is realized super well, and it feels like you can picture it and you can really feel how that place looks, how it feels, everything. So that's something that I feel like the pros, and it's not just the descriptions and the settings, it's also the way each character's inner monologue is realized. It's about the dialogue as well. I think everything is, it just works, and I think that's something that I was the most surprised by. I was like, okay, why is this, why does nobody talk about how well this is written? So that's that's what personally for me was the biggest surprise, and the biggest thing that I think should be a takeaway from this video is that King's writing in this series is super impressive. And personally, also, I'm doing these mostly on audiobook, and the first four books are narrated by Frank Muller, and he also does an incredible job of narrating it. His voices for all these characters are amazing. He does a great voice for each character, and I think his narration of the story also enhances the experience somewhat. From book five onwards, the narrator changed and George Goodell took over, and he's also doing a good job. But I think Frank Muller is just so far and beyond. Like he may be, I've only read these books from him, but he may already be one of my favorite narrators. Like it's quite impressive what he has managed to do with these books. So yeah, I am very impressed by that as well. So overall, I would say the writing, the atmosphere is incredible, and personally, that's my biggest takeaway from this series. Is like that's what took this, which would have been a good story, to being a great story for me. Like I think King is doing a lot of unique things. King is doing a lot of things that could feel out of place. Like basically, book one is a Western story. Book two and three feel kind of like a sci-fi story with some horror elements. Book four is a romance story. So it's like making that work is hard. I think and it somehow works. The way that he writes it, the way that the writing connects everything, the way that the atmosphere works, the way that these characters interact with each other, it somehow all works and connects beautifully together. So that's why I think, that's why I think I'm loving it so much. And I'm really looking forward to read the last three books. As I mentioned, I'm in the middle of book five right now, and I'm also enjoying that one. I'm a bit worried about the ending because I've heard very mixed things about the last three books, but so far I have given each book 5 stars in this series. So at this point, I'm like, hopefully, whatever King does will work for me. But yeah, there is a slight worry that the ending will not work, but that remains to be seen. So that's all I think I have for today. And yeah, this was mostly a spoiler-free overview, obviously, of my thoughts. If you want more spoilery thoughts, head on over to the Bald Booktuber. I will link his channel in the description down below, and I think I'll also make a playlist for the Dark Tower on my channel. And we have been doing some spoiler discussions on there. So we already have done one for book one and two, and another one for book three, and we're planning to do one for book four soon. So yeah, look out for that. Go over to his channel if you want to hear more spoilery thoughts. from me, from Scott, from Madison, and since book 3 also Mike joined us. So yeah, those discussions have been very fun, and I think you'll also see like all the aspects I talked about. Like I think all of us are kind of in agreement about those aspects. And one of my favorite takeaways from the most recent the stream for book 3 was, so basically the way Scott structured it, we were 4 people, and he was like, each one of you tell me who your favorite character was in this book, and each one of us named a different character, and that wasn't planned. So I was just like, it was super funny to me and like super impressive, and like it says a lot about King's characterization and his writing, that he has basically 4 main characters in that book, and each one of us felt like a different one of the 4 was the best, or in that particular book. So for me, that kind of says a lot about how well it's realized. So yeah, if you haven't checked out The Dark Tower, I would highly recommend it. I can't tell you too much about which other books to read because I haven't read anything else by Stephen King. I was planning to read some of his stuff in between, but I'm already behind on this read along. So at this point, I don't think I'll manage to read things in between, but I will definitely, after finishing The Dark Tower, be reading more by Stephen King. This has been like a very big surprise for me, and something that if not for this read along, I probably would have put this off for quite a while. So thank you, Scott, for organizing the read along. And yeah, so that's all for today. Let me know what you guys think of The Dark Tower if you have read it, and yeah, if you have any questions, if you haven't read it, please let me know in the comments and I will talk with you about it. Please keep the comments spoiler free because it's a spoiler free video. As I said, if you want more spoilery thoughts, go over to the Bald Booktuber. We already have 2 videos up for spoilery thoughts. Yeah, so that's all from my side for today. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, goodbye.